Hello and welcome to the Amateur of Life and Death podcast. I'm Laura East.
And I'm Liz Plumpton.
Each episode takes a look at a different aspect of the wonderful world of amateur theatre and features an amateur theatre maker talking about their theatrical life, theatrical loves, and the times when they've died on stage.
This month's episode focuses on Shelagh Delaney's groundbreaking 1950s drama, A Taste of Honey. We'll be talking to designer and director Colin Judges about his life and loves in amateur theatre. Colin is directing the Crescent Theatre's forthcoming production of A Taste of Honey.
And, because it's February, the month of Valentines, we're doing something a little bit different this episode. We're celebrating stories of those who have found love, be it romantic or platonic, through amateur theatre.
We asked listeners to send us in their amateur theatre love stories, and we'll be sharing them with you in celebration of the power that amateur theatre has to bring people together.
Last month we put out a call for listeners of the podcast to send us their amateur theatre love stories, and we were delighted with the response.
Amateur theatre has been bringing people together since well before the days of social media and dating apps, and your stories suggest that it continues to do so.
Nearly everyone who is or has been a member of an amateur theatre company knows of at least one theatre couple, as well as many lifelong friends forged through working on a show together.
So what is it about amateur theatre that means so many people have found love through being part of it? Let's find out.
Ashley got in touch from Kent, and here's his story. My wife Kate and I met in 1990 doing an amateur production of Pink Floyd's The Wall. We've done many productions since, but only once appeared on stage together in the amateur premiere of Feston when we played husband and wife. We now have two lovely daughters who are both members of our local theatre club. In March 2023, we will both be performing on the amateur stage, but in separate plays. She's in A Monster Calls at the Oast Theatre in Tonbridge, and I'm in Witness for the Prosecution at Trinity Theatre in Tunbridge Wells.
And now here's Dee's story of finding love through a university drama society. Steve and I met at university, a North London poly, in a drama society in October 1985, and we were in a show called City Octopus together. A year or two later, we were both in Wojciech. Steve played Wojciech, and I played his common-law wife, Marie. We actually became common-law husband and wife in real life shortly after that, although it took us 20 years and 2 daughters later to get wed on 21st February 2009. It'll be our 14th wedding anniversary this month, although 34 years of living together and 36 as a couple. We've acted in a good number of plays together, including one written by Steve, performed by just the two of us, and directed by my sister. Amateur theatre is a great way to just meet friends generally, and working closely together, sharing a common interest and passion, can lead to being more than just friends.
Here's a Crescent Theatre love story from Joe and Dave. Joe told us, Dave and I first met during a production of The Ghost Train, which was my first time on stage at the Crescent Theatre, in July 1994. I was playing newlywed Peggy Murdoch. I have to confess that I had a bit of a crush on Dave, but he was with his partner of the time, who he later married in 1995. So I contented myself with a short relationship with the actor playing my husband, Charles Murdoch. Years later, I came to see a production of Othello at the Crescent, with a friend of mine who knew the actor playing Iago. Afterwards, I bumped into the actor who'd played Iago and told him how much I'd enjoyed his performance. From somewhere behind him emerged Dave, who asked what I'd thought of his performance as Montano. I have to confess to a little blush. There was still some attraction. In 2006, I was cast as Joy Gresham in the Crescent's production of Shadowlands. Dave was playing C.S. Lewis, and in this tender story of love between an older man and a younger woman, life mirrored art, and our relationship began. We fell in love quickly, and Dave had actually moved in with me before the production ended. We didn't tell the rest of the cast because we didn't want to change the company dynamic, but I suspect some of them had guessed. Dave proposed in 2009, and we married in 2010. I can't believe how fast the time has gone. We love being in plays together, and occasionally Dave has taken on the challenge of directing me. Perhaps most significantly in relation to the current Crescent season, I played Kate in the last Crescent touring production of The Taming of the Shrew. I can't wait to see the 2023 version this summer. What I'd say about love in an amateur theatre is that you can break with all conventions and just let love happen. I'd had quite a tick list of who I thought would be my ideal partner, And most of it didn't match Dave at all. I just fell in love with who he is, and I've never looked back.
And it's not only the adult company at the Crescent where love has blossomed. Taylor, a member of the Crescent Youth Theatre, told us, "I met my boyfriend Charles in the Crescent Youth Theatre last year. He and I met during the show run of Dr. Faustus and started off as relatively close friends. Over the summer break we started to get to know each other more and decided to start dating in August. He has since left the theatre, but I'm still a part of it, but we both still hold a passion for acting on stage. We're still together and it's going strong. I'm very happy to have found him through a theatre I stumbled upon by chance."
We'll be back with some more tales of amour from amateur theatre before the end of the episode, but first, here's Liz and Laura talking to the director of A Taste of Honey, Colin Judges.
Laura and I are delighted to be joined today by Colin Judges. Colin is a long-standing Crescent Theatre company member, set designer, director and maker of specialist props and costumes. Hi, Colin.
Hello.
So, Colin, I know you've certainly been involved with the Crescent as an amateur theatre for some time, but tell us about your first love in theatre.
My parents took me to pantomimes and things when I was very young. But when I was 13, an aunt, who was my mother's best friend really, took me to London to go to the National Gallery because she knew I was interested in art for my 13th birthday instead of her birthday present. Then the 14th birthday, she said, "Do you want to go to the Tate?" So I said, yes. She said, "Would you like to go to theatre?" So I said, "Oh, yes." And we went to the Old Vic to see St. Joan, which I remember reasonably clearly, even though it's 60 plus years ago. And I was completely bowled over, especially by the set for the scene where Joan is burned at the stake, which was basically a pillar and a wall with a shaft of light through a stained glass window across the floor and up the wall. And it just seemed so real and so simple. I was wowed. So that was the first real big thing. And then I built my first ticket when I was at art school. I took the afternoon off and went to the National Theatre, which at that time was still at the Old Vic, and I saw The Royal Hunt of the Sun, which I'd read a review. It mentioned when there's a shield on the back wall which opens up, and inside it turns into an Inca sun symbol with the Inca in it, who's Robert Stevens, who's 6 feet tall in the first place, but he was on very thick-soled boots and with a headdress which made him over 8 feet tall. It was stunning. And I read the review, it mentioned that. And I thought, I have to see this. So that's where it all started.
So it's interesting that both of those had really memorable aspects of the set,
yes,
I suppose, and that
yes,
was an area of the theatre that you subsequently
yes,
specialised in.
I was also an art student.
But
so
I wonder what would have happened if you'd gone to see, a black box show with 2 tables and a chair.
Well, when I see black box shows, I'm often impressed because in spite of it being a black box and maybe just a sofa and a table lamp, you feel you're in the right room. If they're the right
Yes.
table lamp and the right sofa, it creates it for you anyway. So, yeah, I mean, it could have been that. It just didn't happen to be that.
If you can pick one, what's been the love of your theatrical life?
There are a number of sets I've done which I've been incredibly proud of because I thought the West End would have not had anything better. I had a run of 3 very, very satisfying shows a while ago. Sweeney Todd was the first of the 3. I didn't want to do it because the previous production in the theatre had been a sort of theatre legend, but I was leaned on heavily and decided I would do it. And afterwards, people were saying, "Oh, it made such a difference." But one of the actors actually said, until I got onto the set, I didn't really understand my part. And she said, as soon as I walked on, I knew exactly what my character was. And that made a real difference to me. It was followed by Bedroom Farce, which is tricky because it's 3 bedrooms on stage at the same time, very different bedrooms, all in 1976, I think. And getting it all fitting together, I was really proud of that. And then that was followed by American Buffalo, which is a difficult play because it's set in a Chicago junk shop. And at the end of the play, one of the characters trashes the set. And I agreed to do it on condition I was allowed to break crockery. Because that seems to me important if you're trashing somewhere. And we had piles of crockery on chairs and things on top of tables, and they were just pushed over. And I arranged the sort of trashing of the set. I told the director, "Look, leave this with me because I'll organise the set." And quite a lot of trashing was done. And then they pushed over a 6-foot set of shelves, which was full of things, including more crockery. And for the audience gasped and obviously thought it was all over. And then he carried on and on with armfuls of clothes and boxes of boots and things like that. And at the end of it, you could see the audience kind of going, "Oh my God." And as the character
and the
walked
stage manager
out,
probably thinking,
well,
oh my God.
yeah, as he walked out, walking across all this broken crockery, and it was all crunching under his feet, it made such a difference. But on the After Dark night, we actually reset the stage in front of the audience. It took us 8 minutes. We did cheat and have an extra couple of people in. Yeah, 8 minutes was all right. But then I saw it in the West End, and I don't think their production was any better than ours, and I think our trashing was better than theirs. But that's basically because West End set was very huge, very high, whereas ours was low and quite small, so we had things hanging from the ceiling which were knocked down, but we were able to trash more of the set than they were. Some of our actors were better than theirs, but it did have a star cast with people like Damon Lewis and Tom Hiddleston, I think it was. But it certainly wasn't any better than us, probably wasn't as good.
Wow.
Which I think the Crescent does quite often. We don't give ourselves credit sometimes for the fact that we are amateur and we don't have the time to spend on rehearsals and we don't have the money to spend on sets that the West End do.
Tell us about the one that got away.
The one that got away for design, I had this idea for a set for Murder in the Cathedral, which, I don't know, it came up in conversation in the bar one night, and the person who was the art manager at the time put the play in order that I could do this set. But when the director was appointed, the director didn't want it, so I had to do a totally different set. The one which I had in mind, I mean, it's a first play, I had in mind a sort of gold screen with lots of little windows in it. The first scene is women of Canterbury kind of preparing for Becket's return to Canterbury. And I had this idea that these little kind of like shutters would open and the woman would appear like an advent calendar all over the screen. But when they finished their piece, they would shut the window and it would be a stained glass window. It would be lit from behind. So we had this, ended up with a jewel-like screen in gold with all these coloured windows. And it would have been beautiful and would have been so appropriate. But it wasn't to be. And what I did instead was a black, there was an arcaded wall at the back, a large altar, and at the side there were black flats with outlined big bricks and chevron shapes and things. But the thing was, it was only a 14-foot high set, but it did actually look as though it was kind of the scale of a cathedral. And we had a member who was a regular theatre goer at places like the National Theatre and Stratford who regularly told me, this was the best set I've ever seen, and that includes Stratford. As a director, the play I always wanted to direct is Hamlet. Everybody else in the world does, but in my mind, I have a production of Hamlet, which I know will be stunning, and one day I hope it actually gets on stage, because it'd be a great shame for the world if it doesn't. It would be modern dress, but there would be a way of getting a sword on for killing Polonius that is perfectly logical within the play. I think the play lacks a scene where there's any sign that Hamlet and Ophelia were ever friendly, and I know how to work that in. It's difficult to be too precise because it depends on casting, you see. But I would like to do another Shakespeare. I have a short list of Shakespeares I would like to do, but Hamlet is the real one I would love to do.
Tell us about a time when you died on stage.
Don't know, can't think.
Has a flat ever fallen while you've been...
Happily, no, not for me. But I've seen it happen with the professional theatre. I've seen it happen with the National Theatre, which is a good moment. They were doing Flea and Maria, I think. Albert Finney was in it, and he came storming on, slammed the door, and the whole flat started following it. And it was the days when flats were held together with a rope over a cleat on the next flat, and you could see the stage hands hanging onto this rope. One on the rope, another one with his arms round the stage hand, and two others pulling the one back. And Albert Finney carried on, everyone else carried on without batting an eyelid.
So let's move on now to Shelagh Delaney's play, A Taste of Honey, which you are currently in rehearsals for, and which opens in February. What drew you to the play? What's it about?
Well, it's about a mother and daughter. On the face of it, they don't get on, but in fact, underneath that, there is a kind of love between them. It's just the unfortunate situation that the mother is a bit of an airhead who is a good time girl. She's had several relationships with different men. She neglects her daughter all the time. She goes off for weekends. The daughter in the play is only 15, and we know that because she's about to leave school at the end of the term at Christmas, and in 1958, you could leave school at the end of the term in which you were 16. What drew me to it? I have a great love of plays which they're not exactly lost, but they don't get done very often. I try and see them whenever I see a title which I know the title but I don't know the play. I always try and see it. And this one, I think, is particularly interesting because it has so many taboos of the time included in it. Apart from a woman who goes off and lives with men who aren't her husband, and a daughter who is abandoned, who in turn gets pregnant from a mixed race relationship, which again was taboo. There's a homosexual boy who is the nicest character in the play, I think. But all these, homosexuality was illegal at the time. You could actually be banged up in prison for it. I think it's got so many interesting things, which at the time were terribly shocking, but today you see it on television every night. And, most people don't bat an eyelid to any of these things, except for fundamentalist religious people who, of all types, who, it's still a taboo. So, yeah, I think it's really interesting. I mean, it's also a rare play, which the main characters are women. The women are on stage nearly all the time. The three men in it are on stage. One of them is for 2 scenes, one of them's for 3 scenes, and the other one's only on in the second half. So the men are definitely subservient to the women's parts. So I think it's all very relevant today, and it's also historically interesting.
So it was first performed, as you said, in 1958, after the playwright, who was famously only 18 when she wrote the play, sent it to Joan Littlewood, who ran the Theatre Workshop Company at that time. Why do you think the play has endured? I mean, the taboos that you mentioned are no longer taboo in modern UK society, but why has it lasted, and what does it have to say to a 2023 audience?
It's always a difficult question. I think one of the reasons why it survived is that ultimately, although it could sound like a really depressing night out, it is very funny and quite heartwarming, really, especially the relationship between the homosexual boy and the girl. I think he is where the taste of funny comes in. The title obviously is based on a biblical reference, and the mother has a taste of honey and she marries the boyfriend, but then eventually the boyfriend turns her out, so it's only a very short taste of honey. The girl finds a relationship that's working, but in the end, well, I'm going to give a spoiler, but she does actually have this relationship, which is it's something she's never really experienced before.
Yes, the line from the Bibles from the Old Testament where Jonathan says to Saul, "I did but taste a little honey with the end of the rod that was in mine hand, and lo, I must die." Don't think it's a spoiler to say that nobody actually dies after their taste of honey. Are they all punished, do you think, or not?
No, I don't think they are. It's just a slice of life which is going to go on, and at the end of the play you probably have your views about what happens to Joe in the future, what happens to the mother in the future, what happens to Jeffrey in the future. He's the gay art student. Whether you have your own view as to whether the black sailor ever comes back into her life. It's actually a very kind of, it's heartwarming and funny, and I think that's enough to make people want to go and see it, really.
As you said, there is a surprising amount of comedy in the play, even though a plot summary can sound quite grim and gritty. Where are you finding those moments of comedy in rehearsals? Where do you think they come from?
Mostly from Helen, the mother. Because she is so sort of, she is in her head, but she's more a complex character than that. She's sort of, Joe says, "You're 40, I hope to be dead by then." But Helen has been living on her looks and her personality, and I think she is aware that her looks are going to be changing very much within the next few years, and worrying about her future. And she just sort of says what comes into her head without really thinking about it half the time, and sometimes it's just very fun. Joe's reactions too can be very funny too. I mean, the comedy's there with all the characters virtually, but particularly with Helen and Joe.
So as you've mentioned, the play was quite radical for its time in its portrayal of a range of social issues: poverty, female desire, race, sexuality. And at the time when it was first performed, and indeed, we've done a bit of research, until 1968, the Lord Chamberlain was responsible for licensing and censoring plays. Apparently, when A Taste of Honey was submitted for licensing, it did cause quite a furore, but it was licensed, so it was allowed to be performed. And it has been suggested since that Shelagh Delaney's treatment of the subject, particularly of homosexuality, and the favourable critical and public response to A Taste of Honey actually might have played a role in persuading the Lord Chamberlain to partially relax the ban on homosexuality and gay characters appearing on stage a few months later. How important is that sense of time, the time when the play is set, and how attitudes were different, and how have you approached that period aspect of the play with your cast, most of whom I'm pretty sure were not alive certainly in 1958 or probably 1968?
Well, of course, the big bonus in that is I was alive in 58. I actually, my 13th birthday comes within the period, by time span of the actual play. So I remember it all fairly well. And I started off by talking to them about when in my childhood, I lived in a small village in a hamlet where there were 14 houses. And in those houses, only 3 families had a car. The rest used buses and bicycles. I think there were 3 televisions. Again, had 14 families, 3 televisions. The radio had only 3 channels. There was the light programme, the Home Service, and Radio 3. The third programme it was called then. One was comedy and music, the one was sort of plays and lightweight discussions, and the other one was heavyweight discussions, classical drama, a lot of classical music. And you couldn't get anything else. And Friday nights you could get Radio Luxembourg, which was the only place where you could hear pop music as a full channel. For some reason, Friday night, it was the top 20 show, but you could get Radio Luxembourg, but it did keep fading out and coming back again as you were listening to it. So, when you consider what there is now, obviously there were no mobile phones or anything like that. In fact, I think there were only 4 telephones in our community out of 14 houses. People use the phone box a quarter of a mile away a lot, or in an emergency, they go to one of the houses that had a telephone. No freezers, very few fridges, no central heating, which, the very last few days we've been dealing with very cold weather. Well, it was usual to scrape the ice off the inside of the bedroom window in the morning. We just wanted to see if there was snow. Maybe if it was bad enough, you might get a day off school. But mostly we didn't even get a day off school for snow days. We used to have to go in because teachers didn't live so far away at those days because the transport wasn't very good. But all those sorts of things be very handy. I mean, able to talk about those from experience.
In terms of the attitudes to what would have been taboo at the time, has that been something you've explored with the cast?
Well, we talked about it a bit, but I mean, it's difficult because they've got so many lines to learn that they don't have a lot of time for me to say, get on the internet and look these things up. I mean, I know of girls who got pregnant when they were just unmarried, not necessarily even young. And I know the reaction. I'm going to talk about the reaction of people around me. So, yeah, I mean, I know quite a lot about the sort of attitudes in a general thing. Women didn't work, of course, in those days, except the school teacher was a lady school teacher. That was very acceptable. My mother was a nurse. That was acceptable. The rest, women did casual farm work, fruit picking and things like that. And that was acceptable because that was the only labour available. But I remember my aunt got a job in Woolworths when her children went to school. Even within the family, she was kind of, people were sort of saying, what on earth you want to do a thing like that? It just wasn't done.
So let's talk a little bit about the set
Yes.
for the play. The opening stage direction reads, "The stage represents a comfortless flat in Manchester and the street outside. Jazz music. Enter Helen, a semi-whore, and her daughter Jo. They are loaded with baggage." As both a director and a designer, how have you approached the staging and the set for the piece?
There's an interesting thing about this. When I was at art school, we had to do what was called general studies one evening a week. It was a night school. And they actually ran a course, which is a term on television, a term on film, and a term on theatre. We had people from the National Film Theatre showing us clips of films. They were experts on particular countries filming. And so we had some talked about Polish films, someone talked about French films, etc. The television, we have people from television come to talk to us. For the theatre one, we mostly have people from Stratford East, including the costume designer who worked on A Taste of Honey.
Oh, wow.
And an actor who played in many of their performances, and a lighting man who lit Taste of Honey. And they set us a task, which was to design a set for A Taste of Honey. And I do remember mine. It was a very kind of grim looking place. But the costume lady said, when she saw them, she said, it's absolutely right. She said, perfectly right. She said, but we did a rather chintzy set. It was quite pretty. And I thought, that was interesting. I must admit, that's affected the design we've got. To some extent, it has to be prescriptive. I mean, there's the living room, a bedroom in the flat. They also have to have access to outside and to the kitchen and bathroom, which are down the hall. And then there's a street scene as well. So you've got to cram all that on the stage in some way. And it seems to me it's a play which will benefit from a fairly realistic set. Now, I say it's fairly realistic. It only has one wall. I mean, so the rest is all sort of indicated as areas, but there are no walls, so it's not properly realistic in any way. But, I mean, the furniture, we've tried to make it as mixed as possible. I remember I first came to Birmingham, which was mid-60s, going to flats where people were staying, particularly in the Edgbaston off Gillott Road, that sort of area. And mostly it was obvious that they were rooms which had been given the minimum makeover in paint, sense of paint. Yeah. The furniture was all stuff which somebody didn't want, so nothing matched, nothing was posh in any way. Sofas tended to be sort of sagging and in pretty ropey condition you wouldn't have in your own house, and so on. So I've sort of based the furniture on that. So it's a mixture that looks like it's anything you can get. Some of it we had to build because we hadn't got anything suitable in the theatre. So we're building a wardrobe and a chest of drawers because the ones we've got look far too posh.
And you're not allowed to make them look rubbish.
Well, actually, the wardrobe is too big anyway. But no, we're trying not to. I mean, this morning we were talking about the sofa, and I said it'd be really nice if we could sort of stick tape all over where there are apparently splits in it and things. But it's one which we probably would ruin if we did do that. So we're not doing things like that. But the cushions we've recovered, and they don't quite fit. So we're probably going to put tea stains on them and things like that. But yeah, we're trying to make it look as though it is being sort of thrown together.
Yes, comfortless. That's the adjective that jumps out at me from that stage direction.
That's right. It's got nothing that we would call luxurious in any way.
Yeah. And so we're staging this production in the Crescent studio.
Yes.
What sort of seating setup are you using, and how are you using that? What is the sort of black box space?
Well, we're using a straight-on arrangement for seating. Partly this is because we anticipate we may have school parties. And if you have 3 sides or something like that, it means that each of the areas is smaller than when it's all in one piece. And it could mean school parties get split, some in one place, some in another. And staffing isn't really enough to have staff with lots of different groups of kids. So it'd be easier to have those groups as a compact group. I like doing things with 3 sides, but it will be difficult with this play because you've got the street scene as well as the set. It's a basic flat set.
And how heavily involved have you been in creating the set? I think you're working with a sort of junior trainee.
Yeah, I've got some younger members who haven't done scene work before. They're very keen. I've got more people who may join us. Well, I'm trying to give them experience in different techniques. They've been stenciling, which they haven't done before.
Is that for wallpaper? Or?
Yes, stenciling wallpaper. We're going to do paint floorboards. I'll show them how to do that. There's a scenery background, which is proper painted landscape, cityscape, which one of them has spent a lot of time doing. They all seem more keen now than they were when it started, so that's good. But yeah, I mean, it's I've been doing a lot as well. I have other people who help build things, and I'm trying to build a regular team who look forward to coming on to the next show.
Absolutely. So I know you mentioned you had a background as an art student.
Yes.
Where did you learn those techniques? Because I think it's fair to say that your flaws and some of your scenic painting are legendary in the Crescent Theatre and much admired. How did you develop those skills?
When I first joined the Crescent, I joined the Crescent by accident, actually. I was teaching in a school which I left at Easter, and over the course of my being there, they asked me if I would teach stage design, it was actually what happened was we were doing a play and one of the cast went to the head and said, could we do stage design if we do it in sixth form, if we do it in a year and do O-level? And he said, it was 1960s, so he said, well, if we could find someone to teach it, I'll put it in. And she came to me and she said, will you teach stage design? I said, well, I don't know anything about it. She said, well, you're not stupid, are you? You can read a book and keep a page ahead of us. And I said, yeah, okay. I'm thinking a small group of keen sixth formers is probably better than a free period because they won't take it off you because you're timetabled. So I taught stage design to O-level in 1 year, just keeping a page ahead of the book, kids. And they all got grade A's, which was the highest grade at the time. So, of course, the same girl went to the head and said, can we do A-level next year? And so he said, well, yes. So I ended up teaching A-level stage design to groups
before
of about...
you designed a set, apart from maybe
I'd done school sets.
I'd
done school sets.
School shows. Yeah.
And A Taste of Honey in art school.
Yes, absolutely.
I'd worked on... my school did plays which I went to. I was one of about 3 lads who was allowed to paint scenery, but it was fairly basic. It wasn't what you call scenery like we do here. I was teaching this drama design. I went back to the school after I'd left to finish the last few days before the exam. And a girl who wasn't a part of my group used to come in to our room to see what they were doing. And one day she said to me, do you do school plays in your school? And I said, no, we don't. She said, why don't you join the Crescent? She said, my dad's a member of the Crescent. So I said, well, maybe I will. So I'm trying to get rid of her. The next week she turns up with an application form, which we used to have then for membership.
Yeah.
And she gave it to me. She said, fill that in. So she said, I'll give it to my dad. He'll take it in. So I put it in my bag. And she took it out of my bag and said, no, do it now. And she was one of those kids who just said, God, a bit of a bully. And so I filled this form in, not having any intention of joining the theatre. And of course, then I got a letter saying, we invite you to an interview, an audition or whatever.
Yeah.
So I thought, I'll have to go because I'm a polite person. And so I came and I was given the tour and I just sort of ended up being a member. And I just come in and stand on the stage saying, does anyone want me to do anything? And nobody ever spoke to me because they were all too busy working on the set themselves. And, eventually someone says, can you go and get me a nail or something? And you get involved. But props took me over very quickly when they found I could make things. And I was in props for a long time. And then one day I was asked if I'd ever designed a set. And I said, well, school plays. Then I was asked to do a play. Actually, the first thing I was asked to do was a Edwardian music hall. And I designed the set. And one day, the chairman of the theatre, Ron Barber, said to me, how's it going? Is everything okay? And I said, well, actually, I'm having sleepless nights over this. I've never built anything. I don't know if this set can be built. I don't know how you would set about building it. I've never painted anything that big. And he said, oh, don't worry about it, don't worry. He said, man called Howard will be building. He'll know what to do. Just forget about that. And he said, there's a woman up in Wardrobe. He said, we call her Woody. She's Evelyn Woodmore. Said, she's a dragon, but if you go and say to her you need a bit of advice, she'll come down and she'll tell you what to do. But she'll be so flattered to be asked, but she won't let you know that. So I went up, I saw Woody, who was indeed a dragon. And she'd come stomping down with her stick and sort of say, well, you do this, you do that. Make you feel about 3 inches high. And anyway, one day I'd done sort of some bits of painting and stuff, and Monday she came down and she said, no, leave us me 2 flats on the front of the stage, I'll paint them for you. So I'm not going up a ladder, I can't go up a ladder, but I'll paint them for you. So she duly painted me a couple of flats. And she gave me advice about all kinds of things. And actually, at the end, when I'd done it, I actually bought a box of Thornton's chocolates, and I could never do anything wrong after that. I was a blue-eyed boy forever. But she was great because she had lots of experience. She'd been taught by a painter at Stratford. And she passed on lots of information. And the rest is just looking at sets of other professional productions and trying things out which quite often work. And it's always just gone on from there.
And you've designed how many sets now?
85. Well, 85 I've been involved. 2 of them were co-designs where somebody else worked with me. And there's the one which I don't remember doing, actually. I think it was a case of choosing the furniture rather than designing a set. And I probably chose the furniture, was that put in the program as a designer. I mean, my actual training was as an illustrator, which I think is probably why I do the sets I do. They tend to be very sort of detailed realism. The other main set designer is actually worked as a graphic designer, and his sets reflect his background. They're very good too, but I couldn't do them like that. It wouldn't work for me.
And what do you love about designing sets?
I love it when you sit in the audience and you sit there and think, I did that, that's rather good.
Have you ever designed a set for one of those plays where there aren't any stage directions and where the author hasn't given any clues as to the stage?
Well, I've designed Shakespeare.
Well, yes, Shakespeare, obviously. I suppose in Shakespeare you get those sort of embedded stage directions. They're not explicit.
No.
But you do get reference to place sometimes and to,
yes.
Objects maybe.
Well, you do, but I mean, for instance, I did design for the youth theatre. I designed Romeo and Juliet, and basically it was scaffolding, levels and polythene and rubbish all through, and things were lit especially different, and areas became something different. But there was nothing in it that was basically implied by Shakespeare. It was just we set it on this Italian building. Well, it wasn't a building site. It's sort of a building site. And that was interesting too, because we had, under the scaffolding, we had some rubbish, but we made sure it was all stuff that was available in Italy. And occasionally, we'd have school audiences, and they would throw their rubbish under there as well. So we had to pick through the rubbish afterwards to make sure we took everything that wasn't available in Italy.
Yeah.
We even got Italian newspapers and then screwed them up and had them blowing under there, that was a sort of funny side effect of designing that kind of set. And it was in the traverse as well, so the audience had to cross the stage to get to the other side. It was very easy to throw the rubbish.
Take away your rubbish, it's not geographically appropriate.
Well, equally, we did Oleana. It was set in an office, in a lecturer's office, and it's a battle between a lecturer and a student who thinks she's been maligned by him. And we had American rubbish in the wastepaper bin. And we had things that had been sent from America, Hershey bar wrappers, I seem to remember, that was given us from somebody. But we had sort of wrappers and things sent from a friend in America. And the cleaners came in and emptied the bin every night.
Oh, no.
And we had to eventually hide the bin every night so that the cleaners wouldn't empty the rubbish.
One of the other themes of this month's episode, Colin, is it's our February episode. So there's a bit of a Valentine's theme going on.
Yes.
And we've been collecting stories of love that people have found through amateur theatre, be that romantic or platonic love. I don't know, because I haven't asked you before this interview how you met Moira, your wife.
Peculiarly, I met my wife in a school for the blind. We did duties, and that's where we met. As regards the Crescent and my wife and me, I was a member of the Crescent, and I was spending a lot of time here building sets and things, and she used to often go into town shopping on a Saturday, and I'd been here, and she would buy sandwiches in Marks and Spencer's or something, and then come up and bring me my sandwich. There was always a sort of thing about, you can't be in the Crescent unless you're a member because the insurance doesn't cover you and that sort of thing. So eventually she joined, not really to be a member of the Crescent, but so she could come and see me on a Saturday. Eventually she got involved as well. She's done a bit of acting and a bit of chorus work in musicals and PA and things like that. I mean, it wasn't meeting love, but it was kind of, the Crescent owes her far more than they realised, in that she does the washing when I'm working on shows, and she makes sure there's food available, and she's tremendously supportive.
Why do you think, quite a few people do get together in different ways through amateur theatre.
Yes.
Why do you think that is? What is it about this rather time-consuming hobby that that leads love to flourish?
Well, I think Particularly with actors, you have to be very open. You can't hide anything about yourself, really, if you're going to be a good actor. And I think that at least when you're acting, you see the real person, far more than just by meeting someone in a pub or something, I think that makes a lot of difference, particularly, but it only applies to actors, really. Also, you do form close relationships when you're working on a play. I mean, the weird thing about theatre is you form really close friendships and bonds for a couple of months, and then you may never see them again. And you move on to another group who you have these very strong bonds with and friendships with, and it's a very peculiar situation, really. I don't know. It's just odd.
It is. Is there anything else you'd like to talk about today?
The thing which we haven't actually talked much about is, I'm a theatre addict. I go to see theatre. Last year I only saw 50 plays in the course of the year. For 2 or 3 years before that I saw 80. This year I've only seen 2 so far because I've been busy with Taste of Honey.
I should say it's only the 22nd of January.
Yeah, I know. I will see another one this week because I come and see Mercy Seed. But, I feel like if I get through a month and I haven't seen about half a dozen plays, I'm beginning to get twitchy.
The withdrawal symptoms are starting to kick in.
And I've seen a huge number of really great actors. I mean, all the great actors of the last generation. The only one I didn't see really, I suppose, was Edith Evans. But I've seen a huge number of really great actors. The work of a huge number of really great directors. The RSC used to host a World Theatre season every year. I used to see as many of those as I could, so I've seen people like the Moscow Arts Theatre and Comédie Française, Piccolo Theatre of Milan, people like that, Polish and Greek National Theatre. So I've seen a vast range of plays, which of course has influenced what I do.
And in terms of that, what you describe as theatre addiction, what's the chronology of that? Were you a theatre addict before you joined the Crescent, or did that come after?
Ever since my aunt took me to theatre all those years ago, I've gone quite regularly to theatre.
Your whole life, really.
And as I say, I bought my first ticket when I was about 18 or 19. First ticket for myself, and I took the train to London to go to the theatre. And I was there I had 25 shilling seat in the stalls. Ever since then, I have bought tickets for theatre. So I now resent it, the fact that the only people who get free ticket, cheap deals nowadays are people under 25. Because I've kept the theatre going for 60 years and they're getting the freebies, well, not free, but,
the discounts,
discounted seat tickets. But there you go. That's life.
It's 2023 now. Obviously, we've just gone through a very difficult period in recent history when the live theatre was closed for a very long time. With your theatre addiction, how did you get through that? Get through those times?
Withdrawal symptoms mostly.
Did you engage in any of the streaming and things like that were going on?
No, I don't do technology much. Because will tell you, they kind of try and contact me, and I'm just useless. There's a WhatsApp group on Taste of Honey. I'm not on it because I don't know how that works. And I can manage a mobile phone. I can't do texting though, so they can't send me text. Well, they can send me text. I understand how to get text, but I have to phone them back if they're going to get back in touch. I can do emails. That's my limit.
But definitely picked up the pace since then to make up for lost time.
Well, I haven't, because I've only seen 50 and I was seeing 80. I mean, it's not quite the same. A lot of what I see is amateur. I mean, I see some West End plays, not very many actually in the West End because they're too expensive. I do see quite a lot of things in London, but I see a lot in small off-centre theatres where there's a lot of very good theatre going on. I used to see everyththing that the School of Acting did, but it's now the Conservatoire School of Acting. I see virtually everything the Crescent does, quite a lot of what they do in Highbury and Albury, which are local. So, it's a lot of it is about half and half, I would say, professional and amateur. But I also travel. I've been to Sheffield for the afternoon to see plays, and Manchester, Bristol, Northampton, Nottingham, Coventry, Malvern,
Well, hopefully, once The Taste of Honey gets onto the stage, you'll have some time left in the rest of this year to build those figures.
Well, I have tickets booked.
I'm sure you do, Colin. I'm sure you do.
I bought 2 more this week.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today and hearing about both A Taste of Honey, which opens in February, and about your extensive experience and memories of amateur theatre. So thank you very much.
No problem. Thank you.
Thanks, Liz. And now here are some more of our wonderful listeners' stories about how they found love through amateur theatre.
There's no doubt that there are an awful lot of young and not so young people in the world who were born because their parents met through amateur theatre. Here's Emma and Damien's story. We met in 2017 when we both appeared in the Crescent Theatre production of Hobson's Choice. After 3 weeks of furious flirting backstage, we met up after the show was finished and have been together ever since. We now have a 3-year-old son called Rowan, and we're getting married at the end of this year. Meeting someone in amateur theatre has meant finally having someone to go to every show with, and some interesting debriefs on the way home. We have different tastes in theatre, but it means we get to learn from each other. We still perform, and now we try to alternate who gets to audition for something next, so we can manage the childcare.
Away from the Crescent, April from Northamptonshire got in touch to tell us her story. In 1998, I joined my local Gilbert and Sullivan in Northampton. I'd recently graduated from a drama degree and was looking for an acting-based hobby. I saw an ad in the local paper for the G&S group, and as I'd done G&S before, I went along to audition. I passed the audition and their recruitment drive was very successful, as about 10 of us joined at the same time. So rehearsal started for Trial by Jury and HMS Pinafore, and I became friends with people, 2 people in particular. My best friend of over 20 years, Angela, and my husband of almost 18 years, David. David and I started off as friends and got more flirty as time went on, and in time we got together, had a baby, now our 23-year-old daughter, and got married in Las Vegas with Angela as our matron of honour and our daughter as bridesmaid. We're no longer members of the G&S group, but we are all, including Angela and our daughter, members of Mask Theatre in Northampton. Amdram is a great way to find love. David always says he joined to meet women, and it worked. It works because you obviously have a shared interest, you're spending time together with other friends in a more relaxed environment, doing something you enjoy, and post-rehearsal and show drinks are always a fun experience.
And now we're delighted to share a love story involving one of our very own Amateur of Life and Death presenters, John. John met his partner Hannah through performing together at the Crescent Theatre, and Hannah told us, "We met when we were both in One Man Two Governors in 2018. I played Dolly and he played Lloyd. John was drafted into the role super last minute as another actor had to drop out. We had to dance together in the opening scene and always had a quick chat on stage after the beginner's call before the curtains came up. We have continued the chats and dancing for several years now. We have been together for over 4 years now, it's going very well, and we recently bought a house and 3 chickens, together in Lapworth. We both love the Crescent and have so many happy memories, both together and individually at the theatre. The theatre is such a wonderful place to find a significant other. You've already got something in common from the start. You have lots of opportunity to get to know each other in rehearsals and at social events. You also naturally accept that there is another love or commitment in each other's lives, i.e. the theatre. You see each other doing what you love, and you share a bond from being in a play together, and that is really special and unique. You may also have to get used to seeing your other half kissing someone else on stage, which is a weird experience. It makes sense that it's possible to fall in love whilst doing something you love.
Of course, it's not just romantic love that flourishes from amateur theatre. Many of us have made amazing friends. Alice wrote in to tell us about her friend, Jazz. I met my brilliant friend Jazz in 2012, when my dad convinced me to be in the ensemble for a production of The Cherry Orchard with him at a very small amateur theatre. I was only 16 and extremely nervous. I could barely speak to anyone, but Jazz took me under her wing and eventually convinced me a few years later to join the Crescent. 11 years later, she's one of my closest friends, and I've sort of adopted her as my theatre mother. She's helped me change my life in so many ways, and it all started with theatre.
And now an amateur theatre love story that proves you don't even have to get as far as working on a show together to find love. Sometimes just turning up to the same audition is all it takes. Alistair got in touch and said, "Charlotte and I met at an audition at the Crescent in 2016 when the theatre was putting on Frankenstein alongside Mary Shelley in alternating performances. Charlotte had come mainly to audition for Mary Shelley and I for Frankenstein, but also wanted to audition for Shelley as I knew Liz Plumpton was directing and I had worked with her before on The Changeling. I'd just come back from London after not managing to make a go of it as a pro actor, and Charlotte was returning to the stage after a long time away after illness. To cut a long story short, I needed someone to read with for Shelley and saw Charlotte reading with another girl and thought, The red-headed girl is very pretty and seems like a good actress. I'll ask her. We practised a few times and we were then called into the audition room when the magic happened. The lines between us in the scene were as follows.
Do I matter?
Of course you matter.
But do I matter to you?
Yes. We both remember this the same way, which was when she asked, but do I matter to you? The room, theatre and the whole world fell away and we were no longer acting. It felt like she, as Charlotte, a girl I'd just met, was asking me, Alistair, if she mattered to me, deeply and earnestly. And I found myself realising in that moment that this girl really did matter to me, and I had no idea why. After that amazing moment, I convinced her to stay for the Frankenstein auditions, and we spent a good 2 hours talking about everything and discovered we were very similar. I was foolish enough not to ask for her number, but found a Facebook friend request from her the next morning. We went on a date the next weekend, had declared love for each other 9 days later, and moved in together before the shows, for which we were cast in different shows, went up. It was honestly true love and bowled us both over. 6 years later, we have been married for 18 months and shared so many amazing memories at the Crescent together. Amateur theatre is a great way to find love because people are there because they have the passion for it. We aren't paid, audiences aren't always the biggest, but we are there for the love. Finding someone who loves the same thing you do is a fantastic base for a relationship, and having a shared passion in theatre always gives you plenty of date night ideas and things to talk about. It's always lovely to hear from former podcast guests, so we were delighted when Karen Ledbetter, who Liz and I interviewed in April last year, got in touch with her amateur theatre love story.
Greg and I met at the Crescent Theatre in 2001 during rehearsals for The Second Mrs. Tanqueray by Arthur Wing Pinero, which was a studio production. I was playing the titular character, Paula Tanqueray, and Greg was playing one of Paula's ex-lovers, a character called Hugh Ardale. Both Greg and I were members, but we hadn't met before, as Greg was relatively new. It transpires, however, Greg had previously seen me on stage in the Crescent's 2000 production of Macbeth, in which I was playing Lady Macbeth. Perhaps not the most auspicious first encounter. We've worked together on a number of plays since, with me as director and Greg as a cast member. But we've never repeated our first experience of performing together on stage. Perhaps that's not a bad thing, as I vividly remember one matinee performance when one enthusiastic cast member loudly exclaimed, "She knows him!" when Paula and Hugh first met. You need to read the play fully to understand the full importance of this. And I couldn't look at Greg as I knew I would just lose it. I'm a terrible corpser. Greg and I married in 2004, a day we shared with many of our Crescent friends. In 2005, our first daughter was born, followed by our second 4 years later. Our eldest has, unsurprisingly, caught the theatre bug and is a member of Playbox Theatre in Warwick. I am still an active member of the Crescent, but Greg's interests now lie more extensively in poetry, another of his great loves, although he claims I keep taking all his turns at the Crescent. I'm not surprised that so many people I know have met their partners through the hobbies they love, especially through amateur theatre. Working towards a common creative goal can be a fantastic way to forge new relationships, whether they be romantic or not.
So there you have it. Proof if proof were needed that you don't need to be on the latest dating app to find your Valentine, Galentine or Palantine. Just get yourself down to your local amateur theatre and get involved.
Thank you for listening to the Amateur of Life and Death podcast. If you'd like to listen to more, make sure you subscribe at podcast.crescent-theatre.co.uk or via Spotify or Apple Podcasts to get the next episode.
You can find out more about the Crescent Theatre Birmingham and our upcoming productions, including A Taste of Honey, which runs from the 11th to the 18th of February 2023, by visiting www.crescent-theatre.co.uk or by following us on social media.
Amateur of Life and Death is a Crescent Theatre production. This episode was presented by Luke Plimmer, Liz Pumpton and Laura East. The music is by Brendan Stanley and the podcast is edited by Kevin Middleton.